I have replaced 2 water heaters, 1 roof, helped my late husband through 3 car repairs, and watched an entire kitchen floor get torn up and relaid in this house. I did not expect my hip to be next. The surgeon, a young woman named Dr. Patel, who looked to be in her early 40s and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had done this procedure 800 times, told me that a hip replacement at 76 was, in her words, very routine. She said it the way people say minor surgery when it isn't their body on the table. I nodded politely. I have been nodding politely at people for 76 years. It is perhaps my greatest skill, and it has never once served me well. Welcome to Grandma's Raw Revenge. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. So hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. My name is Margaret Elaine Calloway. I am 76 years old. I taught school for 38 years. 3rd grade, then 5th. Then I ran the whole reading department for the last decade before I retired. I know exactly how much a child can absorb before something stops landing. I just never thought I'd have to apply that understanding to my own grown children. I told my 3 children 6 weeks before the surgery date. 6 weeks. I want you to hold that number in your mind. Not 6 hours, not 6 days, 6 full weeks. 42 days, during which any one of them could have circled a date on a calendar, arranged a babysitter, requested a half day from work, or simply driven down to Murfreesboro, to Tennessee to sit with their mother before she went under general anesthesia at age 76. I'm going to tell you what each of them did with those 42 days. Dennis, my oldest, he's 51, called me on a Tuesday evening in September. I could hear the television in the background, some kind of sports program, and the particular quality of his attention that told me he was also scrolling his phone. He said, "Mum, don't worry. We'll all be there." Then he asked, with what I can only describe as admirable efficiency, whether I had spoken to anyone recently about the property value on Clover Ridge Road. Just out of curiosity, just making conversation. Patrice, my 2nd child, sent me a voice message. 4 minutes and 19 seconds. I know the exact duration because I listened to it 3 times. Not because it was moving, but because I kept waiting for her to say something that resembled a concrete plan. She was so sorry about the timing. Work had become absolutely impossible. Her husband Marcus had a work thing. The kids had school things. She would absolutely, certainly, definitely figure it out and be there. She used the phrase, of course, "Mum" 4 times in 4 minutes, which works out to roughly 1, of course, per minute, which is, I think, a personal record for sincerity without substance. And then there was Celia. Celia called me on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks before my surgery. I was in the kitchen making soup, and I felt a small warmth when I saw her name on the screen. The way you feel a warmth at the sight of something you love, even when it has disappointed you more times than you can count. I answered on the 2nd ring. She asked how I was feeling about the surgery. I said I was nervous but ready. She said that was good. Then she paused. A very particular kind of pause that I have known since she was 19 years old. And she said she was actually in a bit of a situation. Her electric bill and her rent were both due. Could I help her out? She is 32 years old. I said yes, of course, because I am her mother, and I've always said yes. I transferred the money from my phone while she was still on the call. She said, "Thanks, Mum. Feel better," and hung up. She did not come to the surgery. She did not call during the surgery. She did not, to the best of my knowledge, think about the surgery at all after she received the money. I want to pause here and tell you something about the morning of my operation, because it is important and I have not told anyone. and I woke up at 5:10 a.m. in my house on Clover Ridge Road. The house was quiet in that particular way that houses are quiet when only one person lives in them. Not peaceful exactly, but the kind of quiet that has a shape to it, a weight. I made coffee I wouldn't be allowed to drink. I sat in my chair by the window. The sun was coming up over the tree line, painting everything in that thin Tennessee gold that you only get in October. And I sat there and I thought, if something goes wrong today, the last conversation I had with my youngest child was her asking me for money. I thought about that for a while. Then I ordered a ride to the hospital. I checked myself in and handed my phone to a nurse named Doreen to hold during the procedure. They kept me for 13 days. Hip replacement recovery is no small thing, regardless of what doctor. Patel and her endless calm would have you believe. There is pain that introduces itself to you in the night, like an unwelcome house guest. There is the indignity of a walker, of needing assistance to do things you have done alone since you were 2 years old. There is a specific kind of loneliness that only exists in hospital rooms. Not the loneliness of solitude, which I have made my peace with, but the loneliness of being surrounded by beeping machines and fluorescent light and the distant sounds of other people's families, and having no one in the chair beside your bed. That chair. I looked at it every day. It was blue vinyl, slightly crooked on its left leg so that it tilted just barely to one side. I memorized that chair the way you memorize a scar. Dennis called on day 2 and day 5. Day 2, he asked how I was feeling. Day 5, he asked whether I had a system for my financial documents, because it might be good to get organized, Mom, at some point. No rush. I told him my documents were perfectly organized. I taught school for 38 years and ran an entire department. Every document I own is labeled, dated, and filed in the cabinet in my study. Patrice called every day from day 1 through day 6, which sounds devoted until you understand that each call lasted approximately 4 minutes and consisted almost entirely of reasons she had not yet come and promises about when she would. The reasons were creative. I will give her that. Traffic, a stomach bug that turned out not to be a stomach bug, a school play that turned out to be a rehearsal and not the actual play, a work deadline that shifted. So many excuses. On day 7, she called and said she was definitely coming on day 9. On day 9, she did not come. She sent a text that said, "Mum, I'm so sorry. Something came up. I'll explain everything. Love you." I read that text. I set my phone down on the blue bedside table. I looked at the blue vinyl chair, and I felt something shift inside me. Not dramatically, not with tears or rage or any of the emotions you might expect. Quietly, the way a foundation shifts, slow and certain and permanent. Celia did not call once after the money was transferred. On day 7, Doreen, a nurse in her mid-50s, with the efficient warmth of someone who has seen every version of human nature this world produces, came in to check my vitals and found me reading a book. She glanced at the empty chair. She looked at me. She said very gently, "Do you have family, Mrs. Calloway?" I said, "Yes." I smiled when I said it. She nodded slowly, the way people nod when they understand something you haven't said, and finished checking my blood pressure. Before she left, she squeezed my hand once, just once, and said, "You press that call button any time, okay?" I have thought about that hand squeeze every day since. On day 13, Dr. Patel signed my discharge papers, pronounced my recovery excellent, and shook my hand. A volunteer wheeled me to the exit in a mandatory wheelchair. Hospital policy, they said, which I found both touching and absurd. I called a ride from the curb. The driver was a young man named Marcus, different Marcus, who asked if I'd had a good stay. I told him it was a hospital. He laughed. We drove the 22 minutes to Clover Ridge Road in comfortable silence, which is the best kind of silence, i.e. the kind you choose. He helped me to my front door with my bag. I thanked him. He nodded once, the way young men nod when they sense something without quite knowing what it is, and walked back to his car. I stood at my own front door for a moment before going in. My hip was aching. I had a walker and a discharge sheet and a small white bag of medications. There was no logical reason to stand on my own porch like a woman waiting to be let in. But I stood there just for a moment, looking at the door I had chosen in 1991, the brass handle I'd replaced once, the small crack in the upper left panel that I kept meaning to fill and never did. I went inside. The house was exactly as I had left it 13 days ago. That sounds like a simple thing. It is not a simple thing. When you live alone and you leave for 13 days and you come back and the house is exactly as you left it, it means no one came. Not to water the African violet on the kitchen windowsill. Not to check the mail stacking up in the box by the door. Not simply to be present in the space where you live. No one came. I set my bag down. I moved slowly through the kitchen. The way you move when your body has been through something and is still negotiating the terms of recovery. I filled the kettle. I set it on the stove. I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard. The rose bushes along the back fence, the hydrangeas I planted the year I retired, shot the small iron bench that has survived every Tennessee summer and winter since 2003. Everything exactly as I left it. I thought about the blue vinyl chair in room 214. The way it sat empty day after day, tilted slightly on its left leg, waiting for someone who never came. I thought about Doreen asking if I had family, and the smile that cost me something I still haven't fully named. I thought about Celia's voice on the phone. "Thanks, Mum. Feel better." And the specific silence that followed. I thought about what it means to love people. I love my children the way I taught reading. Carefully, with the right materials, with attention to what would last. Not because someone was watching, not because there was something in it for you, because love is not a transaction. It is not a performance you give when the stakes are high enough. I made my tea. I carried it carefully to my chair by the window, the one with the worn armrest where my elbow always rests, the one I have sat in for 25 years. I sat down. The afternoon light was coming through the window at a low angle, the way it does in October, thin and golden and slightly melancholy. I sat there for a while, just sat. The house was quiet around me, not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, the other quiet. The kind with a shape to it. I had 13 days to understand certain things about my life. I finished my tea. I set the cup down on the side table, and then I picked up the phone, not to call Dennis, not Patrice, not Celia. I called Sandra Howell, my attorney of 22 years. It was time to do a little restructuring. If you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor: subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Let me tell you something about teachers. We do not react. We respond. There is a difference, and that difference is everything. Reaction is a knee-jerk, a slammed door, a shouted thing you cannot take back. Response is measured, considered. You assess what's in front of you. You determine what's actually needed. You proceed accordingly. Sandra Howell has been my attorney for 22 years. She is a patient woman, careful and precise, two qualities I respect enormously, having spent my career in classrooms surrounded by chaos and needing to remain the steadiest person in the room. When I called her from my kitchen on that October evening, still moving carefully with my walker, still tender in ways I will not describe, she listened without interrupting for 11 minutes while I told her what I needed. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Margaret, are you certain?" I told her I had been certain since day 7. She said she would draw up the documents. I thanked her, hung up, and drank my tea. Outside the window, the Tennessee sky was going dark over the tree line, and the neighborhood was settling into its evening sounds. Someone's dog, a lawnmower 2 streets over, the distant sound of a train. Ordinary sounds, the sounds of a life that continued whether anyone showed up for it or not. 6 weeks after my discharge, I called all 3 of my children and invited them to Sunday dinner. I want to be precise about my intentions that evening, but I was not performing weakness. I was not laying a trap exactly. I was doing something more elemental than either of those things. I was simply allowing them to show me who they were, and then I was going to remember it. I made the chicken and dumplings from scratch the way my mother used to. I will not say more about that than this. Some recipes are memories, and I was generous enough to share mine. I set the table with the good placemats. I put on soft music low on the speaker. I was, by every visible measure, a warm 76-year-old woman who was simply glad her family had come. Dennis arrived first. He always arrives first because Dennis understands that arriving first is itself a statement. He came through the door with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and the specific energy of a man who has rehearsed his entrance. He hugged me. He held it a beat longer than usual. Then his eyes moved across the living room, the built-in shelves, the fireplace, the original hardwood floors, into the kitchen, the appliances, the countertops, back to the living room. A quiet professional assessment disguised as a warm smile. "The place looks wonderful, Mom," he said. "It's the same as it's always been," I said. "I know, it looks wonderful." Patrice was essentially on time. She came in breathless, a store-bought pie in her hands, the gesture of a woman who knows she owes more than a pie, but hopes a pie will do. She hugged me for a long time. I could feel her relief at finding me upright and functional. Then she sat down, and with the careful architecture of someone who had been rehearsing for 6 weeks, she began to explain the hospital. And I will not recount it in full because it does not deserve the dignity of full recounting. There were references to a stomach bug, to Marcus's work schedule, to the children's school calendars, to a plumbing issue I am confident did not exist. She used the phrase "I felt absolutely terrible about it" 3 times, which is always interesting, because people who feel terrible about things usually move heaven and earth not to do those things. I listened to every single word with the patience of a woman who spent 38 years listening to 3rd graders explain why their homework wasn't finished. Which is to say, I absorbed the information without reacting to it, filed it accurately, and drew my own conclusions in private. I told her I understood completely. She exhaled. I passed the dumplings. Celia arrived last, 41 minutes after the stated dinner time, wearing the expression she has worn since adolescence. A kind of preemptive distraction, as though she is always half present and hoping no one notices. She kissed me on the cheek. She sat down. She did not mention the hospital. She did not mention the money. She picked up her fork and asked what smelled so good. She checked her phone twice before the meal was half over. I watched all 3 of them. The way Dennis kept glancing at the bookshelves. The way Patrice laughed a little too readily at everything I said. The way Celia ate with the specific ease of someone who has no idea they are auditioning for something. Then I set down my fork. "I've been meaning to mention something," I said, "since the surgery. It got me thinking." The table adjusted. Subtle. A shift in posture, a slight focusing of attention. But I spent 38 years reading a room of children. I noticed every change. At 76, I said, "It doesn't hurt to get your affairs in order." I've been working with Sandra on some things, just making sure everything is where it needs to be when the time comes. Dennis said, very carefully. "That sounds very sensible, Mum." Patrice said, "Of course. That's so responsible of you." I picked up my fork. More dumplings. What happened next unfolded over the following months with the slow inevitability of something you have planned properly. Dennis began calling every Sunday at 10 a.m. Not 10:15, not 9:50. 10 a.m., precise as a school bell. He asked about my health, my appetite, my sleep. And after 15 or so minutes of devoted son performance, he would find a way to mention, very naturally, some question about the house. Had I thought about downsizing? Had I spoken to a financial advisor lately? Was I keeping up with the property taxes? Just practical things, Mum, just thinking ahead. Patrice began appearing on Thursdays with groceries. Actual groceries. Not gas station flowers and a sympathy card, but real, considered groceries. The brand of tea I drink, the particular soup she knew I liked, fresh fruit. She was warm and helpful and genuinely pleasant company. And sitting across from her in my kitchen on those Thursday afternoons, I felt something I had not expected to feel. Grief. Not for what was happening now, but for what could have been happening all along. For the version of Patrice who might have shown up on day 3 or day 6, or even day 10, any day, one single day out of 13, and sat in that blue vinyl chair and just been there. And that Patrice, the one with groceries and genuine attention, was right here all along. I drank my tea and talked with her about the grandchildren and her garden, and I was, as always, warm. Celia even texted. Short messages, grammatically approximate, but messages. "Hey, Mum. Cold out." And once, memorably, a photograph of a sunset with no accompanying text whatsoever, which I believe was her version of poetry. I responded to all of them with full sentences and appropriate punctuation, because I am 76 and I was raised right. They called, they visited, they performed the devotion they should have offered freely, now offered as an investment. I accepted every visit. I cooked. I laughed. I asked about their lives. I never mentioned the hospital, not once. Not a single reference. Not a sideways comment. Not even the careful silence that signals unsaid things. I gave them nothing to defend against, nothing to apologize for, nothing to negotiate with. The hospital had happened. I had processed it alone, the way I have processed most things in my life. I did not need them to apologize. I needed them to understand. And understanding, in my experience, is best achieved not through conversation, but through consequence. The consequence was already written. Sandra had the papers. It is a Thursday in March now, 5 months since the surgery, and I am sitting on my front porch on Clover Ridge Road with a cup of tea and the specific satisfaction of a woman who has her affairs very much in order. The Tennessee morning is doing what Tennessee mornings do in March, arguing with itself about whether winter is finished. At the dogwood in the front yard is considering blooming. The Henderson's dog 2 houses down is barking at something only he can perceive, which is a daily occurrence and has long since stopped being remarkable. A cardinal lands on my porch railing, regards me with the frank indifference of a creature that owes no one anything, and departs. I think about that cardinal more than is probably rational. My hip feels good, better than good. Dr. Patel did fine work. I walk 2 miles every morning now, which is more than I walked before the surgery, which perhaps means the whole ordeal has done me some mechanical good, even as it confirmed certain other things I can no longer overlook. I made a donation last month to the Hospital Foundation, a specific fund for patient comfort and care, the kind of fund that buys warm blankets and better chairs for rooms where people wait alone. I made it in the name of Doreen, the nurse who squeezed my hand. I did not tell anyone. I did not need to. There are 3 charities in my will now where 3 children's names used to be. The first is a literacy organization out of Nashville, Children and Adults Learning to Read, because I spent 38 years believing that the right words, in the right hands, at the right time, can change the entire direction of a life. The second is a teacher's scholarship fund at a university here in Tennessee, because I believe in the people who show up every single day for other people's children, and I'd like to fund more of them. The third is a children's hospital fund, which I chose because children did not choose to be in hospital beds, and someone should make those rooms a little less lonely. My house on Clover Ridge Road, 3 bedrooms, the hydrangeas I planted myself, the rose bushes along the back fence that have been blooming since 2001, goes to the estate, to be liquidated for those same charities. Sandra knows. Sandra has known since October. She is a patient and precise woman, and she will handle everything exactly as I have specified. There is one additional document in the file, a letter, 1 page, written by hand in my clearest cursive, the careful penmanship of a woman who spent 4 decades making sure her handwriting was legible to 9-year-olds. It is addressed to Dennis, Patrice, and Celia to be opened after. I will tell you what it says. It says this: by the time you read this, you will have questions. I want to answer the one that matters most. And I was in the hospital for 13 days following my hip replacement surgery. The surgery was on October 4th. I was discharged on October 17th. I came home in a car I ordered from my phone. I told you the date 6 weeks in advance. I want to be precise about that. 6 weeks. I don't write this with anger. I write it because I believe you deserve to know the exact reason for every decision in this document. In teaching, we called it being clear. In a family, I suppose it goes by other names. The house was well loved. I maintained it carefully. I hope the charities find it useful. I love you. That part never changed. Margaret Elaine Calloway. Patrice arrives at 11 with coffee cake and the specific brightness of a woman who has decided this will be a good visit. She's wearing the blue cardigan she knows I like. She comes through the gate calling Mum, even though she can see me plainly on the porch, which is a habit she has had since she was 8 years old, and which I've always found privately endearing. She sits in the other porch chair. We talk about her daughter's school project and the price of groceries and whether I think it's warm enough yet to put out the porch cushions. She's good company. She always was when she came. I look at her over the rim of my teacup. She's 47 years old, my Patrice. She has her father's laugh. She asks real questions and listens to the answers. And she is, sitting here in the March light in her blue cardigan, genuinely lovable. I love her. That is not complicated. You can love someone and still change your will. You can love someone and still let consequences be consequences. You can love someone completely and honestly and still refuse to pretend that 13 days of empty chairs was something other than what it was. She doesn't know. She has no idea. She thinks she's here drinking coffee with a grateful mother whose warmth she has rebuilt, whose estate she is slowly, carefully, lovingly inheriting. She thinks the Thursday groceries and the Sunday calls and the blue cardigan have been working. And in the ways that matter, the human ways, the mother ways, they have. They gave me back a version of my children I had stopped believing existed. I am grateful for that. The paperwork just doesn't know about the blue cardigan. Dennis calls at 10 on Sunday as scheduled. We talk for 17 minutes. He asks about my sleep. Good. My hip. Dennis. My appetite. Excellent. I made pot roast again. And then, right on cue, eat as reliable as a school bell, he mentions that a house 2 streets over just sold for considerably more than expected. Just something he noticed. Just interesting, Mum. Just thinking about the market. I say. Anyway, he says, I just want you to know we're all here for you, whatever you need. I look out at the dogwood, which has made its decision and is beginning to bloom. Right on schedule, whether anyone asked it to or not. I know you are, Dennis, I say. I know. Celia calls on a Tuesday. This is unprecedented. She calls and she asks, without preamble, whether I want to get lunch sometime. Just the two of us. She says she's been thinking about things, and then she says, and this lands differently than anything else has landed. She says, I feel like I don't really know you, Mom. Is that a strange thing to say? I sit very still for a moment. It is, in fact, not a strange thing to say. It is the truest thing she has said to me in recent memory. It is also, I note, with the clear-eyed calm of a woman who has already filed her paperwork, approximately 5 months too late. But I am her mother, and I am 76, and the dogwood is blooming. It's not a strange thing to say, I tell her. I'd like that very much. We went to lunch the following Saturday. She ordered waffles, I ordered eggs and toast. We talked for nearly 2 hours in a way we have never quite talked before. Not about money, not about inheritance, not about the careful performance of family duty, just talking. She tells me about a man she's been seeing, which is new. She tells me she's been thinking about going back to school, also new. She asks me about teaching, what I actually loved about it, what was hard, in a way that suggests she is genuinely curious and simply forgot to ask before. I tell her about the boy in 1994 who came into my class not reading at all and left reading 2 grades ahead. I tell her about the year the school nearly cut the reading program, and I stood up at a board meeting in front of 200 people and talked for 12 minutes until they reversed the decision. I tell her about the students who came back years later to tell me things. She listens. She laughs in the right places. She says, I didn't know any of that. You didn't ask, I say gently, without accusation. Simply accurately. She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, I'm sorry I didn't come, Mum. To the hospital. I've been trying to figure out how to say that for months. I look at her across the table. My child. Waffles going slightly cold. And I feel the full, complicated weight of being a parent. The love that doesn't require deserving. The wound that doesn't require drama. The forgiveness that is not the same thing as forgetting. I know, I say. I do not say it's fine, because it was not fine. I do not say don't worry about it, because she should somewhat worry about it. I do not say the will has been changed, and none of you are in it anymore. I say I know, and I mean it, and I pick up my coffee and we keep talking. It is a Saturday morning in early April, and I'm in my garden on Clover Ridge Road. The rose bushes along the back fence are coming back. They come back every year, which is one of the things I love about them. No drama, no announcement, no requiring anyone to notice. They just come back. I planted them the year this house became mine, and they have outlasted more than I expected them to outlast, and they will very likely outlast me, which I find not sad but reasonable. I am 76 years old. I had my hip replaced. I came home in a ride I ordered from my phone. I changed my will. I have had chicken and dumplings with my children several times since, and they are, in the ways that remain available to them, good company. They think they are inheriting this house. They are inheriting Saturday mornings, if they want them. They are inheriting cornbread and the occasional phone call, and a mother who, in spite of everything, remains warm. That is what is available. That is what I have left to give. The paperwork is in Sandra's department. The cardinal is back on the railing. Same one, maybe. Probably not. Either way, he is regarding me with that frank, regal indifference. A creature unburdened by expectation. Arriving and departing entirely on his own terms. I raise my teacup at him. "Morning," I say. He stays for 9 seconds. Then he's gone. I go back to my rose bushes. The thing about teaching, the thing that people who haven't done it often don't understand, is that the most important work is invisible. It's the preparation before the lesson, the patient repetition before the breakthrough, the investment in a child that looks like nothing until 20 years later when they come back and tell you what it meant. I taught well. I loved well. I planned everything, documented everything, filed everything with Sandra in labelled folders she will open when the time comes. And everything will go exactly where I decided it should go in October, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea and a walker, and 13 days of clear information about the people I had raised. In teaching, we call it planting seeds, knowing you may not see what grows. My children, God love them, will call it something else entirely when Sandra makes those calls. But I will not be there to hear it. And somehow, sitting here in the April morning with my tea and my rose bushes and the ghost of a cardinal on my railing, that is the least troubling thought I have had in a very long time. The will is written. The rose bushes are blooming. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you on the next one.